The USS Defiance crossed into the dead zone 3 hours later. Right away, the ship's sensors started showing impossible readings. Space felt different here. It moved and pulsed like something alive. The stars outside the windows twisted into shapes that made no sense. Chief Engineer Pete Johnson called from the engine room. His voice was tight with worry. Hull pressure is holding, but I am reading massive electromagnetic interference. The quantum drive is doing things I have never seen before. Navigation Officer Lisa Chen looked up from her console. Her face was pale and confused. Captain, our position is shifting. The computer says we are at our entry point, and also 3 light-years deeper into the zone at the same time. Morrison held onto his chair as the ship shook. Through the windows, stars appeared and vanished in patterns that hurt to watch. Reality itself seemed broken in this place. Barnes, what are you seeing on sensors? It is like the zone is studying us, sir. Energy tendrils are touching our hull, but they are not causing damage. It feels like it is trying to understand what we are. The ship's communication system came alive with static. A human voice spoke through the noise. It was clear but wrong somehow. Empty and hollow like an echo from a deep cave. Turn back, Defiance. This place devours all who enter. We are all that remains. Morrison looked around the bridge. His crew was listening with fear in their eyes. The voice had once belonged to a living person, but now it sounded like a recording played by a broken machine. This is Captain Morrison of the USS Defiance. Identify yourself. I was Captain Marcus Webb of the exploration vessel Pioneer. That was how long ago? Time has no meaning here. We tried to fight. We tried to escape. The zone consumed our ship and our crew and our very essence. Only echoes remain. More voices joined in. Dozens of them speaking in languages from across the galaxy. Zephyrian captains who had commanded mighty battle fleets. Keth scientists who had studied the mysteries of space for centuries. Vortan warriors who had never known defeat. All of them now just voices in the dark telling the same terrible story. Ships consumed. Crews absorbed. Civilizations ended. It is a trap, Rick Hayes said quietly. The zone does not just destroy ships. It keeps something of them alive, uses them to lure others in. But Morrison heard something different in the voices. The alien captains spoke only of despair and being consumed. Their words carried no hope at all. But the human voices were different. Even in death, they still carried something the others had lost. They warned of danger, but they also shared information. They told other humans what they had learned. Even after being eaten by this thing, they still tried to help others. That was very human. Never give up even when you are dead. Barnes, are you recording all of this? Yes, sir. And Captain, I am. Picking up something else. Deep in the zone, there is a massive structure. It is artificial, but unlike anything in our databases. Dr. Nathan Brooks, the ship's science officer, looked up from his instruments. His face was white with shock. Captain, I am reading energy signatures from hundreds of different ship types. They are all surrounding that central structure. It is like a graveyard, but the ships are still partially functional. Morrison studied the readings on his screen. The structure Barnes had found was huge, bigger than a space station, bigger than most moons. It sat in the center of the dead zone like a spider in its web. Around it floated the remains of every fleet that had ever entered this cursed place. Lisa, can you plot a course to that structure? I can try, sir, but navigation is almost impossible here. Space does not work the same way. Distance and direction. Keep changing. The voice of Marcus Webb came through the speakers again. This time it sounded more focused, like the dead captain was concentrating hard to speak clearly. Captain Morrison, the entity feeds on complexity. The more advanced the technology, the more it gains from consuming it. But there is something about human neural patterns it cannot fully digest. We retain fragments of ourselves. Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. Every other race that had entered the dead zone had brought their most advanced ships. their most sophisticated weapons and technology. The entity had absorbed it all and grown stronger with each fleet. But humans were different. Human minds worked in ways that confused even other humans. They were chaotic and unpredictable. Maybe that chaos was exactly what this thing could not handle. Johnson, I need you to do something that goes against every engineering rule you know, Morrison said into his comm. What do you need, sir? I want you to create a feedback loop in our quantum drive. Make it as inefficient and chaotic as possible. There was silence from the engine room for a long moment. Then Johnson's voice came back full of disbelief. Sir, that could tear the ship apart. Quantum drives are not meant to run inefficiently. They could explode or create a black hole or worse. Or it could give this thing indigestion, Morrison said. Every other race brought their best technology and got eaten. Maybe we need to bring our worst. As the Defiance moved deeper into the dead zone, the thing became aware of them. Energy tentacles reached out from the central structure to touch their ship, but instead of the orderly technological energy it expected, the creature found something. New, human chaos. Emotion made manifest in quantum mechanics. Irrationality turned into energy patterns, things that should not work but somehow did anyway. The entity pulled back. For the first time in thousands of years, it had found something. It could not immediately understand and consume. The human ship was like a puzzle with pieces that changed shape when you tried to put them together. All hands prepare for combat, Morrison announced over the ship's intercom, but not the kind you are used to. We are going to fight this thing, with the one weapon no other species has. Pure human stubbornness. The crew looked at each other with confusion. How do you fight a cosmic entity with stubbornness? But they trusted their captain. If he said they could do it, then they would try. Barnes checked her weapons systems. They were working, but the targeting computers were going crazy. The entity seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. Normal targeting could not lock on to it. Sir, I cannot get a target lock. This thing is everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Then do not use the targeting computer, Morrison said. Trust your instincts. Humans have been hitting targets for thousands of years before we had computers. Lisa Chen was fighting with the navigation system. The ship's position kept changing, without them moving. One moment they were 1,000,000 kilometers from the central structure. The next moment they were right next to it. Captain, I cannot plot a stable course. Space itself is shifting around us. Then stop trying to plot a course, Morrison said. Just point us where you think we should go and trust your gut. Dr. Brooks was getting readings that made no scientific sense. The entity was made of matter that should not exist. It used energy in ways that violated the laws of physics. It was like trying to study something from a completely different universe. Sir, this creature operates on principles we do not understand. Our science cannot explain how it works. Then stop trying to explain it, Morrison said. Sometimes the best way to fight something impossible is to do something equally impossible. The entity reached out again with its energy tentacles. This time it tried to probe deeper into the human ship's systems. It wanted to understand how these chaotic beings made their technology work. But the more it studied the human ship, the more confused it became. The engines ran on controlled explosions that should have destroyed the vessel. The shields used energy fields that interfered with each other but somehow still worked. The weapons fired projectiles using chemical reactions that were older than most civilizations. It was all wrong. Technology was supposed to be logical and efficient, but human technology was a beautiful mess that functioned despite breaking every rule of proper engineering. The entity had consumed the knowledge of 1,000 advanced civilizations, but it had never encountered anything like this crude, chaotic, human approach to science and technology. For the first time in eons, the cosmic predator felt something it had forgotten. Uncertainty. These humans might actually be dangerous. Morrison smiled as he felt the entity's confusion through the ship's sensors. Other races had tried to fight this thing with their best and brightest. perfect ships with flawless technology, but perfection was predictable. Chaos was not. Johnson, how is that feedback loop coming? Ready when you are, sir. But I still think, this is insane. Good. Insane is exactly what we need right now. The USS Defiance pushed deeper into the heart of the dead zone. The massive structure grew larger on their screens until it filled the entire view. It was not just big, it was impossible. The thing seemed to exist in several dimensions at once. Parts of it appeared solid, while other sections looked like they were made of pure energy. Dr. Nathan Brooks stared at his instruments with his mouth open. The readings made no sense at all. "My God," he whispered. "It is not just a structure, it is alive. A cosmic entity that feeds on technological civilizations." The entity pulsed with absorbed energy from countless devoured fleets. Pieces of ships from 100 different species floated around it like metal organs. They were still working but twisted into new shapes. The crews of those ships had been changed too. They were still alive, but no longer themselves. The voice of Marcus Webb came through the speakers again. It was clearer now that they were closer to the source. "Captain, the entity feeds on complexity. The more advanced the technology, the more food it gains. But there is something about human thinking it cannot fully process. We keep parts of ourselves that it cannot digest." Morrison understood now. Every other species that had entered the dead zone had relied on their most advanced vessels, their most sophisticated technology. The entity had absorbed it all and grown stronger with each meal. But humans were different. Human minds did not work in logical patterns. They were chaotic and unpredictable. They solved problems through gut feelings and crazy ideas instead of pure logic. "Johnson, are you ready with that feedback loop?" "As ready as I can be for controlled insanity, sir. The quantum drive is now running in ways that should be physically impossible." "Perfect. Lisa, take us toward the entity's core. Do not use the navigation computer. Just point us where your instincts say to go." Chen looked at her captain like he had lost his mind, but she turned off the computer and relied on her human intuition instead. Somehow, the ship began moving in a straight line toward the entity's center, even though space was twisted all around them. The entity noticed their approach and reached out with massive tentacles of pure energy. But instead of the ordered technological power, it expected the creature encountered something completely new. Human chaos made real. The ship's systems were running all wrong, but they still worked. The engines created more heat than they should, but kept pushing the vessel forward. The shields flickered and sparked, but held against attacks that should have destroyed them. The weapons charged up using power drawn from 17 different sources at once. It was beautiful chaos, controlled disaster, organized insanity. The entity recoiled. For the first time in thousands of years, it had found something it could not immediately understand and consume. "Barnes, target those absorption nodes on its surface. But do not use the targeting computer. Trust your eyes and your hands." Barnes looked at the weapons console. She had been trained to use computers for targeting. Relying on manual aim seemed primitive and dangerous. But she switched to manual control and began firing. Her shots were perfect, not because of superior technology, but because of human intuition. She could feel where the targets were even when the sensors said they were not there. Her weapons hit every time and the entity's crystalline surface began to crack. "It is working," she shouted. "The entity is releasing energy every time we hit." "Nah." Dr. Brooks watched his instruments with amazement. "The creature is letting go of some of the ships it absorbed. I am reading life signs from vessels that have been missing for decades." Across the dead zone, ships that had been considered lost forever began to break free from the entity's control. Crews that had been transformed into parts of its mind suddenly remembered who they were. The cosmic predator was losing its grip on its victims. But the entity was far from defeated. It realized it could not absorb the human ship, so it began to change tactics. The space around the Defiance warped and twisted. Gravity wells appeared from nowhere trying to crush the vessel. Time moved in different directions in different parts of the ship. Hull integrity at 60% and falling, Johnson reported, from engineering. These forces are beyond anything our ship was designed to handle. The crew fought to keep their stations working as reality bent around them. Normal procedures meant nothing here. The rule book had been thrown out the window and burned. Morrison made another decision that seemed insane. All hands abandon standard operating procedures. I want everyone to run their stations based on gut feeling alone. No computers, no standard methods. Make it up as you go. The crew stared at him in shock. Everything they had been trained to do was based on following proper procedures. But they trusted their captain and began operating their stations by instinct alone. The result was beautiful chaos. The ship began moving in patterns that violated the laws of physics. Its systems operated in ways that should have been impossible. The Defiance danced through the entity's attacks like it was performing an insane ballet. The entity found itself completely confused. It was designed to feed on logical technological systems. But the humans were not being logical. They were not following any rules or patterns. The creature could not predict what they would do next because the humans themselves did not know. "Sir, the entity is destabilizing," Barnes called out. "It cannot adapt to our chaos. Every time it thinks it understands us, we change everything." Commander Hayes gripped his station as the ship spun through dimensions that had no names. "How is this working? We are flying by the seat of our pants and somehow winning." Morrison smiled as he watched the cosmic predator struggle with something it had never encountered before. "Because that is what humans do best. We are the only species in the galaxy that can make things work even when they should not work at all." The entity tried one more desperate attack. It reached into the ship's computer systems to take control of their technology. But human technology was not like other races. It was built by people who understood that things break, and you have to fix them with whatever you have on hand. The ship's computers were protected not by advanced firewalls, but by layers of patches and workarounds that made no logical sense. The entity's probe got lost in a maze of human engineering that followed no rules and obeyed no logic. "Johnson, how are the engines holding up? They should have exploded 10 minutes ago, but they are still running. I stopped trying to understand why." "Lisa, can you get us closer to the entity's core? I have no idea where we are going, but we seem to be getting there anyway." The USS Defiance pushed through the entity's defenses using pure human stubbornness. Every attack was met with improvised solutions. Every impossible situation was solved with crazy ideas that somehow worked. The cosmic predator began to panic. In all its eons of existence, it had never encountered prey that fought back with controlled insanity. It had consumed civilizations that spanned galaxies, but it could not figure out how to eat one small human ship. "Dr. Brooks, what is the entity's status?" "It is trying to retreat, but it cannot move. It has been in this location for so long that it has become part of the space around it. We have it trapped." Morrison nodded. The hunt was almost over, but the most dangerous part was still to come. A cornered predator was always the most deadly. All hands prepare for the final assault. This thing has been eating civilizations for thousands of years. Time to give it some indigestion. The crew prepared for battle. Not the clean, organized combat they had been trained for, but the messy, chaotic fight that humans excelled at. They were about to show this cosmic entity why humans were the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Not because they were the strongest or the smartest, but because they were the only ones crazy enough to charge into impossible situations and somehow come out on top. The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded history. The cosmic entity was used to absorbing ordered technological systems from logical civilizations. But now it faced something completely different. Human engineering that should not work, but did anyway. Chief Johnson had turned the ship's systems into a symphony of controlled disasters. The shields fluctuated randomly but somehow protected them from attacks that should have destroyed the vessel. The weapons fired in unpredictable patterns that confused the entity's defenses. The quantum drive existed in 17 different states at the same time. The entity is trying to adapt, Dr. Brooks reported from his science station. But every time it thinks it understands our technology, we change how everything works. This was humanity's secret weapon. Not superior technology, but the ability to make technology work in ways it was never designed to. Other species built efficient logical systems. Humans built beautiful messes that somehow functioned despite breaking every rule of engineering. Barnes continued targeting the entity's absorption nodes using manual control. Her shots were guided by human intuition rather than computer precision. Each hit caused the creature to crack and release absorbed energy from the countless ships it had consumed over the centuries. "Captain," Lisa Chen called from navigation. "The entity is releasing more trapped vessels. I am reading life signs from ships that have been missing for decades. Weak signals, but they are definitely alive." Across the dead zone, ships that had been considered lost forever continued to break free from the entity's grasp. Crews that had been transformed into extensions of its will suddenly remembered their own names and identities. The cosmic predator was losing control of its victims for the first time in millennia. But the entity was far from finished. Realizing it could not absorb the chaotic human ship, it began using different tactics. Space around the Defiance warped into impossible shapes. Gravity wells appeared and disappeared, trying to tear the vessel apart. Time moved backward in some sections of the ship while racing forward in others. "Hull integrity at 40% and dropping fast," Johnson reported. His voice was strained as he fought to keep the engines running. "These reality distortions are beyond anything our ship was built to handle." The crew struggled to maintain. Their positions as the laws of physics became suggestions rather than rules. In the navigation section, Lisa found herself aging backward while her instruments aged forward. Barnes discovered that her weapons were firing before she pulled the triggers. Morrison watched his crew adapt to the impossible conditions. Any other species would have been paralyzed by the breakdown of natural law. But humans had always been good at dealing with situations that made no sense. "All hands listen carefully," Morrison announced over the ship's communication system. "Forget everything you learned in training. I want everyone to operate their stations based on pure instinct. No computers, no procedures, no logic. Just do whatever feels right." The crew looked at their captain like he had completely lost his mind. Everything they had been taught was based on following proper protocols and using advanced technology. Operating by gut feeling alone went against their entire education. But they trusted Morrison and began running their stations by instinct alone. The results were immediately apparent. Systems that had been failing under the reality distortions suddenly started working again. Not because they made sense, but because the operators stopped trying to make them make sense. The ship began moving through the entity's attacks like it was dancing. The Defiance twisted and spun through dimensions that had no names. It dodged gravity wells that appeared from nowhere and slipped through time distortions that should have torn it apart. The entity found itself completely baffled. It was designed to feed on logical technological systems that followed predictable patterns. But the humans were not being logical at all. They were operating on chaos and intuition. The creature could not predict their actions because the humans themselves did not know what they were going to do next. Commander Hayes gripped his station as the ship performed maneuvers that violated every law of physics. "How is this working? We are making everything up as we go, and somehow we are winning." Morrison smiled as he watched the cosmic predator struggle with something it had never encountered. Because improvisation is what humans do best. We are the only species that can solve problems by completely ignoring the rules. The entity made one final desperate attempt to understand its prey. It reached deep into the ship's computer systems, trying to take control of their technology. But human computer systems were not like those of other races. They had been built by engineers who knew that things break, and you have to fix them with whatever materials you have available. The ship's computers were protected not by advanced security programs, but by layers of patches and temporary fixes. That made no logical sense. The entity's probe got lost in a maze of human programming that followed no consistent logic and obeyed no universal rules. Every time the creature thought it understood one part of the system, it would discover that part was connected to 17 other parts in ways that should have been impossible. Human technology was held together by digital duct tape and creative solutions to problems that should not have existed. Johnson, status report on the engines. They should have exploded 20 minutes ago, but they are still running fine. I stopped, trying to understand why, and just started hitting things with a wrench when they make funny noises. Barnes, can you target the entity's core structure? I cannot get a computer lock, but I can see where it hurts when I shoot it. Manual targeting is working better than any automatic system. Lisa, plot a course to the entity's heart. I have no idea where we are or where we are going, but we seem to be getting closer to something important. The USS Defiance pushed through the entity's reality-bending defenses using pure human determination. Every impossible attack was met with improvised solutions. Every situation that should have been fatal was solved with crazy ideas that somehow worked. The cosmic predator began to experience something it had not felt in eons: fear. In all its thousands of years of existence, it had never encountered prey that fought back with organized insanity. It had consumed civilizations that spanned entire galaxies, but it could not figure out how to digest one small human ship. Dr. Brooks monitored the entity's condition from his science station. The creature is destabilizing. Its energy matrix is becoming chaotic. It cannot maintain coherence while trying to process our illogical behavior patterns. Morrison nodded. The hunt was nearly over, but the most dangerous part was still ahead. A cornered predator was always most deadly when it had nothing left to lose. "All hands prepare for final assault," Morrison announced. "This thing has been eating entire civilizations for millennia. Time to show it what happens when it tries to eat humans." The crew prepared for the climactic battle, not the clean, organized combat they had trained for, but the messy, chaotic fight that humans had perfected over thousands of years of warfare. They were about to demonstrate why humans were considered the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Not because they had the best technology or the strongest weapons, but because they were the only race stubborn enough to charge into impossible situations and crazy enough to somehow emerge victorious. The entity gathered its remaining power for one last desperate attack, but it was about to learn that there was no force in the universe more dangerous than humans who had decided that the impossible was just another problem to be solved. The final confrontation took place at the entity's core, where it had stored the technological essence of every civilization it had consumed over the millennia. The creature was desperate and hungry. It made one last attempt to absorb the USS Defiance and its chaotic human crew, but Captain Morrison had prepared one final surprise for the cosmic predator, something so fundamentally human that no alien mind could have conceived of it. "Dr. Brooks, I want you to transmit our ship's logs, all of them. Every maintenance report, every crew personal log, every random thought anyone has recorded." Brooks looked at his captain with confusion. "Sir, that is just noise. Random human experiences and emotions mixed together." "Exactly," Morrison said, with a smile that would have terrified the entity if it could have seen it. Brooks began the transmission. Thousands of hours of recorded human thoughts and experiences poured into the entity's consciousness. Maintenance logs that complained about broken coffee makers, personal diaries full of homesickness and hope, random observations about the weather on distant planets, love letters to family members light years away. The transmission hit the entity like a virus. For eons, it had consumed pure technological data that was efficient, logical, and predictable. But human logs were completely different. They contained contradictions, emotions, and thoughts that made no logical sense when viewed together. How could the same being write a technical report about engine efficiency and then immediately write a poem about missing their pet cat? How? Could creatures capable of building starships also worry about whether they had remembered to water their plants back home? The entity began to convulse. Its crystalline structure started cracking as it tried to process the impossibility of human consciousness. These beings created advanced technology while maintaining completely chaotic thought patterns. They solved complex mathematical problems through intuition and emotion rather than pure logic. "It is working," Barnes shouted from her weapons station. "The entity is destabilizing. It cannot process human irrationality." The cosmic creature that had been designed to feed on order found itself choking on chaos. Its entire existence was based on consuming logical technological systems. But human consciousness was not logical. It was a beautiful mess of contradictory thoughts and impossible emotions all existing in the same mind at the same time. As the entity's structure collapsed, it released not just the ships it had absorbed, but all the technological knowledge it had accumulated over thousands of years. The information poured out into space like water from a broken dam. "All ships, this is Captain Morrison of the USS Defiance." Morrison broadcast on all frequencies. "The dead zone is collapsing. Prepare for immediate evacuation. Any vessel that can move should head for the exit now." Across the dying zone, hundreds of vessels from dozens of different species began their escape. Many had been trapped for centuries with their crews somehow preserved within the entity's matrix. They emerged to find that salvation had come not from the galaxy's most advanced civilizations, but from the species everyone considered slightly crazy. Zephyrian captains who had commanded fleets of crystal ships found themselves rescued by a single human vessel held together with spare parts and determination. Keth scientists who had studied the mysteries of the universe for millennia were saved by beings who solved problems by hitting them with wrenches until they worked. The USS Defiance led the exodus from the collapsing dead zone. Behind them, the cosmic entity writhed in its death throes as human irrationality poisoned its logical systems. The creature that had devoured civilizations for eons was finally experiencing something it could not digest. "Captain," Dr. Brooks called out, "the entity is completely destabilized. Its energy matrix is breaking down into component particles. The dead zone itself is dissipating." Morrison watched on the main screen as the darkness that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries finally began to fade. Stars that had been hidden for millennia became visible again. Space returned to its normal state as the entity's influence disappeared. As the Defiance emerged from the dying dead zone, Morrison received communications from the Galactic Council. Alien voices demanded to know how one human ship had succeeded, where entire fleets had failed. How had these primitive, chaos-loving creatures defeated a cosmic predator that had eaten their greatest civilizations? Morrison's response was simple and direct. "We did not try to beat it with superior technology or greater firepower. We beat it by being human, chaotic, unpredictable, and too stubborn to know when we are supposed to give up." The dead zone collapsed, entirely leaving behind only a nebula of free energy and scattered remains of the cosmic entity. The outer colonies were saved, and the galaxy learned an important lesson about the power of human unpredictability. Other species built their technology to work perfectly under ideal conditions. Humans built their technology to work despite everything that could possibly go wrong with it. When faced with the impossible, they did not retreat or despair. They rolled up their sleeves and got to work. The crew of the USS Defiance returned to Earth as heroes, though they never quite understood why. Their approach had been so effective. They had simply done what humans always did when faced with an impossible situation. They improvised, adapted, and refused to accept defeat. Commander Hayes summed it up best during the debriefing. Every other species in the galaxy builds ships to work perfectly. We build ships that work despite everything that is wrong with them. Turns out that makes all the difference. The rescued alien crews struggled to understand how the humans had succeeded. Their own civilizations had sent their most advanced vessels with their most sophisticated technology. All had been consumed by the entity. But one chaotic human ship, with jury-rigged systems, had destroyed the cosmic predator completely. The answer lay in the fundamental difference between human thinking and alien logic. Other species approached problems systematically and logically. They built efficient solutions that worked under predicted conditions. But when those conditions changed, their perfect systems failed. Humans approached problems with controlled chaos. They built messy solutions that somehow worked under any conditions. When their systems failed, they fixed them with whatever was available and kept moving forward. Perfection was less important than persistence. The story ended with the Defiance, receiving new orders. They were assigned to explore other impossible regions of space that had stymied alien civilizations for centuries. The galaxy had learned that when something seemed truly impossible, it was time to send in the humans. After all, there was one thing humans excelled at above all other species: going places they were not supposed to go and somehow making it work. The impossible was just another engineering problem waiting for a creative solution. As the USS Defiance departed for its next impossible mission, Captain Morrison looked back at the space where the dead zone had been. Normal stars shone there. Now, ships could pass safely through that region again. Entire worlds had been saved, all because one human crew had been too stubborn to give up and too crazy to know they could not win. In the depths of space, the echo of human chaos continued to ripple outward, carrying a simple message to any cosmic predators that might be listening. Humanity was coming, and they brought controlled chaos, impossible solutions, and an absolute refusal to accept the word impossible. Any cosmic entity that wanted to threaten human space would have to deal with the most dangerous force in the universe: human stubbornness, backed up by jury-rigged technology and an infinite capacity for creative problem-solving. The galaxy had been warned. The big room in New Geneva was very quiet. President Lisa Hayes sat in her chair and looked at the blue light coming from the table. The light showed a creature that looked like a giant bug. It had 4 eyes and long, thin arms. Its name was Ambassador Vex, and he came from very far away. Ambassador Vex moved his mouth parts when he talked. He looked scared and tired. Behind him in the light, they could see pictures of burning planets and broken spaceships. The pictures showed his people dying, and their worlds being destroyed. "President Hayes," the bug creature said in his strange voice, "my people are going to die. The Korthak Empire is coming for us. They have already killed 17 different groups of people in space. We are number 18. President Hayes leaned forward in her chair. She was a small woman with gray hair, but her eyes were hard and smart. Next to her sat Carl Rodriguez, who was in charge of Earth's military. On her other side was General Patricia Stone, a tall woman with short black hair. "Ambassador Vex," President Hayes said slowly, "you came a very long way to ask us for help. Your people have been flying around space for hundreds of years. We just learned how to leave our own planet. What do you think we can give you that will help?" The alien's 4 eyes blinked one after another. "We heard stories about your people, stories about your weapons and your ships. The Korthak Empire is very strong. They have big ships and many soldiers. They never let anyone live when they take over a planet." Carl Rodriguez looked at General Stone. They both knew something that the alien did not know. Earth did have good technology, but not the kind that most space people expected. "Tell us about these Korthak people," General Stone said. She touched a button and more lights appeared in the air. The lights showed numbers and pictures about the enemy. "The Korthak Empire rules by fear," Ambassador Vex said. His voice shook when he talked about them. They are very good at war. They have the same plan every time. They come with many ships. They destroy everything. They never lose because they always have more soldiers than the people they fight. That is why we need your help, the alien continued. We heard you have strong weapons and fast ships. We heard your people are smart about fighting. President Hayes stood up and walked to the big window. Outside, she could see the city with its tall buildings and flying cars. Millions of people lived down there. Good people who worked hard and took care of their families. Ambassador, she said without turning around, you asked for our best weapons and our strongest ships. I'm going to give you something much more dangerous than that. The alien's eyes got wide. What could be more dangerous than your best weapons? General Stone smiled, but it was not a nice smile. Ambassador, did anyone ever tell you why most space people stay away from Earth? Why, when they make deals with us, they always write special rules about how humans should act? I thought it was because you are new to space travel, Ambassador Vex said. No, Carl Rodriguez said, sitting back in his chair. It is because when humans get angry, or when we see someone hurting people who cannot fight back, we change. We become something that makes the whole galaxy scared. The alien looked confused. His long, thin fingers moved around nervously. I do not understand. You speak of your own people like they are weapons. President Hayes turned back to face him. Ambassador, the Korthak Empire is about to learn something. They are about to find out why people in space tell scary stories about humans when the lights are off. She walked back to her chair and sat down. We are not going to send you ships or guns or bombs. We are going to send you something that the Korthak Empire has never faced before. We are going to send you humans. But humans are just people, Ambassador Vex said. How can people be more dangerous than weapons? General Stone pulled up more pictures in the light. These pictures showed human soldiers in different wars throughout history. Ambassador, humans have been fighting wars for thousands of years. We have fought each other, and we have fought nature, and we have fought problems that seemed impossible to solve. We learned something important, Carl Rodriguez added. The best way to win a war is not always to have the biggest gun or the fastest ship. Sometimes the best way to win is to make the other side so confused and scared that they defeat themselves. President Hayes nodded. The Korthak Empire wins because they do the same thing every time. They show up with more soldiers and bigger ships than their enemy. They use fear to make people give up before the fighting even starts. But what happens? General Stone asked. When they face an enemy that refuses to be scared? What happens when they face people who look at impossible odds and decide to fight anyway? Ambassador Vex was quiet for a long time. He looked at the three humans and tried to understand what they were telling him. You are saying that you will send soldiers to help us fight? Not just soldiers, President Hayes said. We are sending you the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. We are sending you hope. The alien still looked confused. Hope is not a weapon. Carl Rodriguez laughed, but it was not a happy laugh. Ambassador, hope is the most dangerous weapon there is. When people have hope, they do not give up. When people have hope, they find ways to win fights that they should lose. The Korthak Empire has been winning for so long because everyone they fight thinks they cannot win, General Stone explained. But humans do not think that way. When someone tells us we cannot win, we get angry. When someone tells us to give up, we fight harder. President Hayes stood up again. Ambassador Vex, in 3 days, a human ship will leave Earth. It will carry 5 humans to your home world. These 5 people will teach your people something that the Korthak Empire does not understand. What will they teach us? They will teach you that there is always a way to win if you are willing to think differently. They will teach you that the strongest enemy in the galaxy can be beaten if you refuse to fight the way they expect you to fight. General Stone added, and they will teach you that humans keep their promises. When someone asks us for help, we help them, even if it means fighting the strongest empire in the galaxy. Ambassador Vex looked at the pictures still floating in the air. Pictures of his people dying and his worlds burning. Then he looked at the 3 humans sitting in front of him. Why would you do this for us? You do not know us. We have nothing to give you in return. President Hayes smiled for the first time since the meeting started. Ambassador, that is exactly why we will help you, because you need help and we can give it, because someone has to stand up to bullies no matter how big they are. And because, Carl Rodriguez said quietly, that is what humans do. When someone cries for help, Earth answers. The meeting was over. Ambassador Vex left to tell his people that help was coming, but it would not be the kind of help they expected. It would be something much more dangerous. It would be humans who refused to give up. In 3 days, the galaxy would begin to learn why humans were the most feared and respected people in space. Not because they had the best weapons, but because they had something that could not be destroyed or defeated. They had the human spirit, and that spirit was about to change everything. Dr. Wells finished her analysis of the day's events and looked up with satisfaction. Admiral, in 18 hours, 5 humans changed the balance of power in this part of the galaxy. We did not do it with superior weapons or advanced technology. We did it by showing people that things could be different. And tomorrow? Admiral Kresh asked. Jake looked out at the stars visible through the viewport. Tomorrow we start visiting those 47 conquered species. We start showing them that they do not have to stay conquered. We start building something that the galaxy has never seen before. What is that? An alliance of people who refuse to let bullies win. A federation of species that protects each other.